The longest reigning monarch in British history, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, has died at the age of 96.
I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service and to the service of our great imperial family to which we all belong. God help me to make good my vow.
Over the long course of 9 momentous decades, she witnessed social and economic change on a global scale. As Princess Elizabeth of York, she'd come to the throne at the age of 25, following the sudden death of her father, King George VI. During her lifelong reign, the Queen dealt with no fewer than 15 Prime Ministers, including Sir Winston Churchill, Margaret Thatcher, Tony Blair and Boris Johnson. As head of the Commonwealth, she became the most travelled monarch in history, as head of state of 15 countries. And Queen's death comes just over a year after the loss of her husband, the Duke of Edinburgh, her consort for over 70 years. Over the decades, the Queen was greeted by millions of people worldwide and met her subjects on thousands of engagements in the UK and overseas. And the Queen was last seen by the public in this image taken at Balmoral on Tuesday, inviting Liz Truss to become the new Prime Minister. As the crown passes to King Charles III, the Queen's death will be deeply felt by her family, by the people of the UK and by millions in the Commonwealth and beyond. Earlier this evening, Buckingham Palace announced the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, the longest reigning monarch in the history of the United Kingdom, and the commanding presence in British public life over a span of 8 decades. She died at Balmoral in Aberdeenshire at the age of 96. The Queen's eldest son, Charles, at the age of 73, has become King Charles III. It was at 6:30 this evening that Buckingham Palace released this formal statement. The Queen died peacefully at Balmoral this afternoon. The King and the Queen Consort will remain at Balmoral this evening and will return to London tomorrow. Our royal correspondent Nicholas Witchell is with me and will be with me throughout this extended edition of BBC News at 10. And Nick, let's just reflect first on the fact that this news, which came several hours ago, is already, and we feel it, calling ripples of dismay and shock and grief, not just in the UK, but around the world.
Wave upon wave of grief. I think it was Boris Johnson who coined that phrase. It is a moment of profound importance and profound sadness. A moment so many people had hoped somehow would never happen, but of course now it has. Yet it is hard still to take in the sad reality that this reign has ended. I think it is going to take time for the nation to process this. There will be, and there is, a tremendous sense of loss. Many, I think, will find this quite unsettling and disorientating. And we're seeing people are needing to come together there outside Buckingham Palace on this bleak, rainy night in the early autumn. I think people feel the need to be together at this particular moment, seeking comfort from each other, because amid all the other uncertainties that we face as a nation, now our head of state has died. This person who has been in the background to our lives, as we've been saying this afternoon, for most of us throughout all of our lives. There aren't many people who have known anything other than a nation with the Queen as its head of state. She was indeed, as Prime Minister Liz Truss said, the rock on which modern Britain was built. A source of reassurance and stability for so many decades. We saw that during the COVID pandemic. We've seen it so many times. There was something timeless about her. It was Boris Johnson who also said that. And that really is monarchy. There is something timeless about monarchy, an institution that is above politics, that captures the imagination and the affection in a way that no politician can possibly do, representing something beyond itself. And that's what she did for these 7 decades, representing the best of qualities of decency and humility and duty, constant in the ever-changing world that we live in. Pretty much every aspect of our lives has changed since 1952 when she came to the throne, except her, until now. I think history will say that this was one of the most remarkable reigns in the 1,000-year history of the monarchy in these islands, a reign that will be talked about, a queen who will be talked about in the centuries that come. But now the crown has passed. We have a king.
We'll discuss lots of those aspects, Nick, in the next 90 minutes or so. The impact of the reign and, of course, the nature of transition as well and what that means, not just to the royal family, but to the entire country. But for now, Nicholas Witchell, thank you. The death happened at Balmoral, the Queen's cherished estate in Aberdeenshire, where she decided in July that she wanted to spend the summer, as she always did, despite the health problems and despite the mobility problems. But that is where she passed away earlier today. Our Scotland editor, James Cook, is at Balmoral tonight. And I'm imagining, James, that the solemn sense there will echo what happens here in Buckingham Palace, as we saw just a while ago.
Yes, that's right, Hugh. I mean, the sun set on the Balmoral estate on Royal Deeside just over a couple of hours ago, shrouded in thick cloud, also setting on an era, on the Elizabethan era. But before we even examine that period, here tonight there is a family in mourning. The King leading those mourners, his family, who have all gathered here, all the senior members of the royal family gathered here this evening to pay their respects to a woman who was a grandmother and a mother, as well as, of course, the monarch. It is, one might say, perhaps appropriate that the Queen died here in the place that some say she loved more than anywhere else, the Royal Deeside Balmoral estate, where things continue. The rain has teemed down all day. The River Dee continues to rush under Isambard Kingdom Brunel's bridge, just a short distance from here. And there is continuity too in the shift from the Queen to the King, to King Charles.
James, many thanks for now. James Cook, our Scotland editor at Balmoral, where of course we saw some of the other members of the royal family gathering earlier today. Shortly after the Queen's death was announced, the new King, King Charles III, released this statement. The death of my beloved mother, Her Majesty the Queen, is a moment of the greatest sadness for me and all members of my family. We mourn profoundly the passing of a cherished sovereign and a much-loved mother. And Charles goes on to say, I know her loss will be deeply felt throughout the country, the realms and the Commonwealth, and by countless people around the world. During this period of mourning and change, my family and I will be comforted and sustained by our knowledge of the respect and the deep affection in which the Queen was so widely held. The words of the new King, King Charles III, a short while ago. Well, tonight in this extended edition of BBC News at 10, we will be paying tribute to Her Majesty, of course, to all that she achieved in a momentous and eventful reign. We'll be considering the impact of her death on British public life. The Queen had symbolised, as Nick was saying, all that was constant and all that was reassuring. And for the vast majority of people in Britain and the Commonwealth, a treasured and highly visible link with Britain's past has now gone. Our royal correspondent, Daniela Relf, reports now on the events of the day so far.
Tuesday, the 6th of September, the last photographs of the Queen, 96 years old and still at work. Meeting the new Prime Minister at Balmoral, a duty she had been keen to fulfil, and one we now know was her final duty after 7 decades of public service. Around 4 o'clock this afternoon, a number of the Queen's family arrived at Aberdeen Airport. Her grandson, the Duke of Cambridge, was first to emerge, followed by her daughter-in-law, Sophie, the Countess of Wessex, and then her 2 youngest sons, Edward, the Earl of Wessex, and Andrew, the Duke of York. The Duke of Cambridge drove the family group to Balmoral to join his father and other members of the family already there with the Queen. Harry, the Duke of Sussex, arrived separately later in the evening. Here in the UK for a number of charity events, his wife Meghan did not accompany him to Scotland. At 6:30, Buckingham Palace officially announced the death of Queen Elizabeth II. Following tradition, the statement was attached to the palace gates by 2 footmen as tributes began.
Queen Elizabeth II was the rock on which modern Britain was built. Our country has grown and flourished under her reign. She was the very spirit of Great Britain, and that spirit will endure. She has been our longest ever reigning monarch. It's an extraordinary achievement to have presided with such dignity and grace for 70 years. And with the passing of the second Elizabethan age, we usher in a new era in the magnificent history of our great country, exactly as Her Majesty would have wished, by saying the words, "God save the King."
And also from the Leader of the Opposition.
For the vast majority of us, the late Queen has been simply the Queen, the only Queen, above all else, our Queen. As we mourn her loss, we should also treasure her life, our longest serving and greatest ever monarch. Above the clashes of politics, she stood not for what the nation fought over, but what it agreed upon.
Throughout the day, there had been growing unease about the Queen's health. In the Commons, as Keir Starmer stood up to speak, opposite him, the Prime Minister was being told of the Queen's condition. Information passed to Angela Rayner, Labour's deputy leader, who left her seat for a while to discuss the development, before the Speaker of the House addressed the chamber.
I know I speak on behalf of the entire House when I say that we send our best wishes to Her Majesty the Queen, and that she and the royal family are in our thoughts and prayers at this moment.
Cheered by onlookers, one of the Queen's last royal engagements was in July, with her daughter, Princess Anne, opening a new state-of-the-art hospice in Berkshire. But these kind of visits had become rare over the past year, as the Queen relied on her walking stick, her mobility compromised. The royal household had tried to adapt to keep her active and visible. A golf buggy at the Chelsea Flower Show helped keep the Queen comfortable. But she had become noticeably thinner and frailer, something that severely limited her involvement in her own Platinum Jubilee celebrations, with her family increasingly representing her. At the weekend, her son stood in at the Braemar Highland Games, always a favourite event for the Queen that she reluctantly missed. Like so much of her life, the decline in her health was played out in public. Duty may have got harder to manage physically, but mentally, even emotionally, the Queen remained engaged and working to the very end.
Some of the lovely images there, including the image of the Queen inviting Liz Truss to form a government, and that was of course just a couple of days ago. Queen looking frail but smiling and clearly very focused on the important constitutional duty there of talking to the new Prime Minister. We saw crowds starting to gather outside Buckingham Palace as soon as the news emerged that there were concerns about the Queen's health, and then of course there was the formal demonstration of the news from Buckingham Palace when they posted that notice on the railings there. And the crowds are still there tonight, and our home editor Mark Easton is at the palace, and obviously, Mark, you've seen the crowds milling around there throughout the evening. The question for you I really wanted to put was this, given your perspective on British public life and the Queen's role in that. What has changed today in the way that the people of the United Kingdom possibly see themselves and the way that they have a reference point in the monarchy which has changed today?
Well, I think that's a very good question, Hugh. The Queen had become something of a keystone in the nation's architecture, a solid and immovable piece that defined the nation's image to itself. And now that piece is no longer there. And I think this is, a huge moment for Britain. And I think, many of the people who are coming here tonight, despite torrential rain on and off, still thousands here at Buckingham Palace, are doing so because they need to come together. They need to deal with the reality of the Queen no longer being there. The Queen herself spoke of the part of her job being to ease the process of change, that symbol of continuity. But of course, this is going to be a massive change, and she won't be there. And that, I think, is what makes this such a difficult moment for Britain. That people will want to search for things that show the stability and strength of the UK right now, and perhaps that one figurehead is not there. So the people who've come here this evening, despite this bad weather, are doing so because, yes, they want to mourn their Queen, to share in their loss, but I think also that they want to mark an extraordinary life, a Queen who was their Elizabeth the Great.
Indeed, Mark, many thanks again for the thoughts there at Buckingham Palace. Mark Easton, our home editor. Buckingham Palace, of course, very much regarded by the Queen as the office, if you like, the office of the firm of the royal family. Somewhere like Balmoral was seen as a favourite summer escape. Sandringham, again, in the east of England, had a very special quality. But, of course, Windsor really was the base. That's where the Queen spent so much time. That was home in so many ways. And spent a lot of time there, certainly in recent years as well, because of the COVID pandemic and the lockdown, and spent quite a bit of time at Windsor with her late husband, Prince Philip, too. So Windsor and the royal family very tightly interlinked. And our special correspondent, Fergal Keane, has been gathering reaction from people in the royal town of Windsor.
The signal of an ending, in the place so close to her heart, and in whose heart she was beloved.
We've just heard the news. What are you feeling?
Wow, it's just hit me. It really has, and I think it's going to hit everybody in this town, but not only here, all over the world. She was a grandmother, she was a mum, she's part of my life, she's part of my mum's life, my late father's life, everybody.
As the news filtered out across the town, there was comfort in gathering together, to absorb, to reflect.
It's very sad. I think everyone's just come to pay their respects because she's such an amazing woman. Just very sombre mood in Windsor, really.
And what did she represent to people of your generation?
A guiding light, a moral code, how to conduct yourself, how to act, what's right and what's wrong.
And she was such a special lady. She was so lovely and so cute and so warm, and I think she just won everyone's heart. Even with my daughter, she said, I really want her to live to 100. She's been saying that to me for the last few years. And she's just part of our life, really. She was a part of our life, especially living local as well.
The sense of royal continuity is not broken by death. But the Queen's example of resilience in the face of adversity will be missed.
She's had terrible moments throughout her reign of things that have happened that she's had to deal with. And she's just done I think she's done just a good job, and she said it would be for her life, for the length of her life, and that's what it's been.
Here on the streets of Royal Windsor, the sense of an epoch having passed is palpable. There is the sense of mourning shared with the entire nation. But something else. For these people have lost a neighbour, a Queen who was part of their daily lives.
Amir Bukhari was getting calls from relatives in Pakistan who'd heard the news. He runs a cafe beside Windsor Castle.
No words actually to express my emotions. It's really sad.
What did she mean to you?
She was really, really important. It's not only me, it's around the world. Everybody will feel very sad, very down, very depressed. Yes, and for us, she was a neighbor, and we feel more.
No matter how long anticipated, the end has crystallised loss. The passing of a monarch who symbolised to people the best of their nation, of themselves. Long after sunset, they were still arriving. Their queen gone, their mourning just begun. Fergal Keane, BBC News, Windsor.
Some lovely contributions there from people in and around Windsor today, and Fergal there having a chat with lots of them, including people who rather touchingly called themselves neighbours, people in their shops and businesses, of course, around Windsor Castle. So that was during the day and the early part of this evening. Let's go to Windsor tonight, and my colleague Adina Campbell is there. Adina, how would you describe the atmosphere in Windsor this evening?
Well, there's a deep sense of loss here in Windsor tonight. People have been gathering to pay their respects. They've been laying flowers. Those flowers have now been moved to the Long Walk. They've also been lighting candles and sharing stories, reflecting on some of their fondest memories of the Queen. And people have travelled far and wide to pay. But of course, this is close to local residents, and we can speak to one local family who got here at about 9:30 this evening. Mariam, Gordon, Maz, you're from Slough, just 15 minutes down the road. Mariam, you were a big fan of the Queen.
Yeah, I was, and I was very sad to hear the news when I found out that the Queen had passed away.
And you were here back in May during the Platinum Jubilee celebration.
Yes, I was. I was here during the Platinum Jubilee.
And how was that?
It was really fun, but it was amazing to see and watch, and all the people crowded.
Gordon, Maz, you've both met the Queen in the past. You've been in close proximity. What was that like?
Some years ago in my case, and having seen service in my lifetime, I'm proud to be here this evening, although I'd rather not be. Just an amazing lady, 70 years, and we've just celebrated a Jubilee. An incredible week for this nation, one that will go down in history with a change of Prime Minister and obviously now with our Sovereign. So just very proud indeed to have had the honour of serving.
Maz, why did you feel the need to be here in Windsor tonight?
I think the Queen she's like everyone's grandmother, really. The constant that's always been there. I think everyone's going to be feeling like they've lost a member of their family, really. She's done some incredible work for this country, and we'll forever be grateful for her. There's nobody like her in the world. I'm very sad.
And what does it mean being outside her main home?
Yeah, I mean, we were only here a few days ago having a nice little coffee and summer's day, and I just said to my husband earlier that last time we were here, Queen was with us, she was alive, and today we're here mourning her loss, really. So yeah, it's a really sad day, really sad day.
Do you think you'll be coming back here over the coming days?
We enjoy Windsor anyway as a town, but this is the castle, Her Majesty and the family are very much a part of it, and there's a connection there with the people, I think, and very often, in recent times particularly, we have seen the Royal Standard here on a frequent basis because Windsor was so much her home. Obviously she's away in Balmoral at the time of her passing, but I think we have a natural affinity with Windsor, and that will continue.
Gordon, Maz, Mariam, thank you very much. Well, when we heard the news a short time ago, Windsor was still, it was silent, and there was a very poignant moment. A rainbow appeared, and that brought a smile to some sad faces.
Adina, many thanks, Adina Campbell, and thanks to your guests as well there in Windsor. One of the first tributes paid earlier this evening, as soon as the news was announced of the Queen's death, was in Downing Street, where the new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, came and presented her tribute to the Queen with some thoughts on the Queen's remarkable contribution over so many years on the throne, and of course reflecting on the fact that she had been installed as Prime Minister just a couple of days ago, thanks to that audience that she'd been granted with the Queen in Balmoral. And as the guest there was telling Adina in Windsor, it is turning out to be a momentous week in which the Prime Minister has changed, and now we're in a position where King Charles III is on the throne. It is no longer Queen Elizabeth II. Let's go to Downing Street, and our political editor Chris Mason is there. Chris, lots of tributes today, including from Boris Johnson and Keir Starmer, and of course the first was the new Prime Minister Liz Truss, and what a burden in some senses for a new Prime Minister to be in a position where an event of this magnitude has happened within days of taking office.
A huge burden, Hugh, just 48 hours into office as Prime Minister, just 48 hours on from her own trip to Balmoral for her first, and it turns out only, audience with the Queen as Prime Minister. Within 48 hours, returning here to Downing Street, herself adjusting to high office as the head of government, having to find those words to try and sum up on behalf of the UK the loss of the Queen. We've learnt in the hours since that statement that Liz Truss had been informed by the Cabinet Secretary Simon Case at around about 4:30 this afternoon of the Queen's passing, and then shortly after she gave her statement here in Downing Street at around 7 o'clock this evening, she did have a telephone conversation with the King. This evening, the Prime Minister has been chairing meetings involving senior secretaries of state and staff from the royal household to discuss events in the forthcoming days, and both tomorrow and on Saturday there'll be tributes to the Queen paid by MPs in the House of Commons. And of course, for the next little period of time, the next 10 days or so, politics will fall silent. The noise and the turbulence so often associated with this postcode will fall silent. And I think there's a bigger question worth reflecting on as well tonight, Hugh, which is how the passing of the Queen shapes our national conversation from here on, because of her longevity, because of that constance in a world of change, and because of that dignity and privacy and discretion around her own personal views, in contrast with the raging noise of politics at Westminster. Where does it leave us as a country in terms of how we see ourselves and how the world sees us? Because for so many, the Queen personified the UK, and now she's gone, and that could have significant consequences, I think, for the national conversation, and with it our national politics in the months and years to come.
Indeed, Chris, something that I'm sure will be discussed again in the days ahead, but many thanks for the moment, Chris Mason, our political editor there, and Nicholas Witchell, our royal correspondent, is still with me. And really, just to reflect on that very salient point that Chris was making there, which is that this change of monarch from Elizabeth II to Charles III is really about changing, in some senses, the way that people will see the monarchy, because they saw the monarchy in a certain way with Elizabeth II and saw it in that way for many, many years. That changes, and that brings with it maybe changes in perception where the monarchy is concerned.
And I think she has left a huge legacy in several areas. I think she demonstrated the sometimes almost intangible strength and value of a constitutional monarchy. I mean, monarchy done right is a powerful focus for national feeling and national unity. And to pick up the point that Chris was making there, she did indeed project the image unfailingly positively abroad. It is sometimes referred to as soft power, and she projected it par excellence. If you think of the times over the past 70 years when the reputation of Britain has been at a low ebb internationally. In the 50s after Suez, in the 1970s when Britain was regarded as the sick man of Europe, respect for her never wavered. She burnished the reputation of Britain on the international stage. She encouraged political stability. She's been described as a kind of hidden backstop in the Constitution, a force field around which good behaviour within the political establishment was encouraged. And these things, you know, should not be underestimated. And finally, she kept the monarchy strong and respected, reigning very much in the style of her beloved father, George VI. And she kept it strong, really, by above all, by setting a personal example. And one might imagine that her greatest hope now will be that the strength of the monarchy will continue under King Charles and then under William.
Nick, thank you. And I'm sure that the crowds we saw there outside Buckingham Palace tonight, many people will be reflecting on the themes that Nick was underlining there, because everyone is by now aware that the Queen was the longest serving monarch in the history of the United Kingdom and held a commanding presence in British public life over many decades. That is established clearly. And tonight, of course, people have been reacting to the news of her passing earlier today. Our special correspondent, Lucy Manning, has spent part of the day with some of those people who've gathered outside Buckingham Palace.
She was long to reign over us. Almost all of her life, and for most here, all of theirs. Through the streets of London they streamed to pay tribute to our Queen. What's your reaction to the news?
I'm so sad, because she was a wonderful lady. She dedicated her whole life to the nation, and we could just thank her for it. And we feel for her family today. It's a very sad day.
I'm so sad, because she was a lovely, beautiful lady, beautiful mother, and a beautiful grandmother. Could just shed many tears for her. She was very much loved.
There is a real sense that this Queen was a history maker.
It's devastating. She's going to be missed by so many people. She affected so many lives, and she was an absolutely amazing monarch.
And what did she mean to you?
Well, I think as a woman, it's amazing to see a female at the helm of our country, and I might not ever get the chance to see another woman as Queen.
Deeply saddened about, the Queen. She's done a lot for the country, and it's sad to see, her go, and, condolences to the family.
What did the Queen mean to you?
She meant everything to me, my family, a sense of community, loyalty, giving back to communities, serving, the community as a whole. So she meant a lot to everyone here today.
What will you take away from her life?
I think, the biggest thing that I'll remember is, her sense of sort of charity, giving back.
The crowds used to gather here in their hundreds of thousands to see the Queen on the Buckingham Palace balcony. As soon as her death was announced, they came back. There is a hush here, as the one constant in the country's life is no more. In the place where she died, Balmoral, the locals were enormously proud of their regal visitor who joined them each year.
Just very sad. She's been a monarch for over 70 years, and it's history, and we just wanted to be here to share our condolences to the just be part of it, kind of thing. Yeah.
It's really sad news to hear, actually. It's that's the reason we came. We were hoping to pass on our regards, or just to be here. So it's kind of sad, actually.
Although you never knew her or anything, but her significance was just incredible. And it doesn't really hit home, I don't think, until you hear something like this, and what she meant to us and what she meant to the country. It was absolutely incredible legacy.
At Buckingham Palace, thousands came, through the rain, through the night. No one here truthfully is sure what to do, but they know they want to be here, to stand, to mark the moment, to bring flowers, to remember. There was applause.
Happy and glorious.
And the anthem, words that have echoed here for 70 years.
God save our King.
Her kingdom is united in sorrow but also in admiration, in the sense that we have been fortunate to live in her era. Through change and turmoil, there has always been the Queen.
Well, those crowds are still there, some people drifting away, new people arriving, walking down the Mall, making their way towards Buckingham Palace, and Lucy is still there for us too, so let's join her now.
Well, it started with a few hundred people at the gates, and the news of the Queen's death, it seemed to spread quietly through the crowds, and they stood there watching as the Union flag was lowered. And then as the evening went on, thousands turned out. As you said, hundreds are still here. You might be able to hear they're still singing the national anthem, and it has just been very moving in its simplicity here. And I'm joined by two people, Tracy and Olivia, who came down this evening to pay their respects. I just want to start, Tracy, by asking you, why did you want to come?
Well, the Queen has been a part of my life forever. I'm in my 50s now, and all my life she's just been a part of my life. And I've been following the news all day, really, really sad and heartbreaking news. And at the last minute, 8:30 this evening, I thought I'm going to jump on the train and come down and be a part of this, what is just a momentous occasion. Put some flowers and little candle and just be a part of celebrating Her Majesty's life.
And what does it mean to you to be here?
It is a historic moment. I mean, it's a great atmosphere. As you said, it's a great atmosphere tonight. It's quite sombre, but there is a kind of air of sort of celebration of her life as well. So I'm just so pleased that I came here to actually just experience this and be a part of it.
And Olivia, what about you? Why did you decide to come down this evening?
Kind of the same as Tracy, you know, even for me growing up, you know, seeing all the jubilees and the events and things like that, you know, it feels like the Queen's just always been there. And I think you'd struggle to find somebody more kind of culturally and, you know, just historically significant, all the things that she's lived through, these huge kind of, you know, changes. And for it to almost feel so suddenly to come to an end, obviously, like we've been following the news all day, and, you know, obviously the news of the passing was incredibly sad, but it's also a real atmosphere. My friends were here before and they said, you know, you've got to come, you've got to, you know, be a part of it. And as sad as it is a really kind of huge part of history, and it's incredible to kind of just even be a small part of that.
And what did the Queen mean to you?
I think she meant a lot of things to a lot of people. Me personally, I think she was in a sense somebody to look up to, somebody who, despite kind of hardships and challenges, you know, whatever kind of came her way, she always seemed to be so sturdy and so steady. And I think I really kind of respect that kind of steadfastness about her. And I feel that's a real quality to have had and to have showed to so many people.
Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I think tomorrow the focus will again be at Buckingham Palace as people tomorrow wake up for the first time in 70 years without the Queen on the throne.
Lucy, many thanks again. Lucy Manning, our special correspondent, and thanks to your guests as well there at Buckingham Palace. Now the time is 10:38 and you're watching an extended edition of BBC News at 10 on the 8th of September 2022, the day that Buckingham Palace announced the death of Queen Elizabeth II. Her Majesty died at Balmoral in Aberdeenshire at the age of 96. And the Queen's eldest son, Charles, at the age of 73, has now become King Charles III. Shortly after 6:30 this evening, Buckingham Palace released this statement. The Queen died peacefully at Balmoral this afternoon. And the King and the Queen Consort will remain at Balmoral this evening and will return to London tomorrow. And that statement there, confirming the official news of the Queen's death, was then posted outside royal palaces across the UK. This was at the Palace of Holyrood House in Edinburgh. The same tradition then was observed at Buckingham Palace and other palaces as well. And then at Buckingham Palace, the official announcement there was fixed to the railings, and the crowd, knowing that this was part of the tradition, were waiting for that to be posted. It's the way that the royal household announces news in the traditional way, before the days of social media. And that, again, is the formal recognition of the news of the Queen's death. That was at Buckingham Palace early this evening. And clearly there's a lot of focus on the response in the nations of the UK, of course, in Northern Ireland and in Wales, and in Scotland especially, where Balmoral has been such a prominent feature of royal life over the years. And the BBC's Sarah Smith is at Holyrood for us. And Sarah, maybe some more thoughts from you on the impact of the news of the Queen's death in that Scottish context.
Well, the Queen held a very special place in many Scottish hearts because she so obviously loved Scotland. And being here just last year addressing the Scottish Parliament, she talked of her deep and abiding affection for this wonderful country, as she called it. And because of the amount of time that she spent in Scotland and her clear enjoyment of it, the Scots felt very close to the Queen. She came and visited them here very often. You had the First Minister Nicola Sturgeon tonight talking about how the people of Scotland loved, admired and respected the Queen. You've been talking during this programme about where as a nation we go from here after the passing of Queen Elizabeth, and that's a question that will be felt quite acutely in Scotland, where, as you know, there is continuing debate about whether Scotland ought to become an independent country, and it's without doubt that the Queen was part of the glue that held the nations of the United Kingdom together. So without her, we'll wait to see how that debate might take a different direction, but undoubtedly people who will be unsettled by the passing of the Queen will be wondering what kind of political impact it's going to have as we ask ourselves questions about what kind of United Kingdom we are now and whether in fact we should remain united. The SNP always said, when the Queen was on the throne, that if Scotland were to become independent, she would remain the monarch, that she would still be Queen of Scots, as well as Queen of the rest of the United Kingdom. Under King Charles III, the debate may take a different turn, and that's something that people here will be waiting to see.
Indeed, Sarah, many thanks. Sarah Smith there for us at Holyrood. Of course, response as well from the First Minister of Wales earlier today, Mark Drakeford, who expressed his sympathy on behalf of the people of Wales. Let's talk to our Wales correspondent, Hywel Griffith. Hywel, how would you describe the general response there today?
Well, I'm here at the Senedd, Hugh, and a few people have already come to lay flowers. The flags have been lowered to half-mast and all official business has been suspended for a period of mourning. This is a place that the Queen came to know well, particularly in recent decades. It was where she made her final visit to Wales back in October last year for the 6th opening of the Senedd, and she was seen then for almost the first time using a walking stick in public. So it became very clear to people from then on that she was becoming more frail. It's an institution, some people argue, that she lent legitimacy to. She was actually part of the first National Assembly's opening in 1999. We're told, despite some official advice from Whitehall, that she shouldn't really be part of the devolution project. But she was involved, and what people here have been telling me is that she was happy to see change and wanted to be part of it rather than to stand against it. As you mentioned, the First Minister, Mark Drakeford, has added his condolences, talking about the Queen as a person of dedication and selfless devotion. All those many organisations for which she was patron in Wales, all the sporting organisations, the agricultural ones, she would be seen sometimes at the Royal Welsh Show. So lots of people wanting to express their sympathy to the family as we enter now this long period of mourning.
Hywel, many thanks. Hywel Griffith there for us at the Senedd in Cardiff Bay. In Northern Ireland, of course, a part of the UK that's known its share of terrible troubles, and the tension in the political process still very much in evidence. So this period of uncertainty, which certainly applies to Northern Ireland, now obviously will be taking in the changes around the monarchy as well. And Emma Vardy is at Stormont for us. Emma, how would you describe the response there today?
Hugh, there's been very moving tributes here across the political spectrum. And of course, the Queen visited Northern Ireland many times in times of peace, but also during the 30 years of conflict known as the Troubles here. And what really stands out about the Queen's relationship with the island of Ireland is the role that she played in peace building and in reconciliation. Now, of course, the big political dividing line between communities here is over the very sovereignty of Northern Ireland itself. So of course the Queen is seen differently by Unionist and by nationalist communities. But after the Good Friday Agreement largely ended the violence here in 1998, the Queen's visits here became hugely important for the British and Irish relationship, and that's very much been reflected in the tributes from political leaders today. We heard from the leader of the Democratic Unionist Party, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson. He said that Her Majesty reached out the hand of friendship to help with the reconciliation process. And Michelle O'Neill, the Vice President of Sinn Féin too, she said she was personally grateful for the Queen's contribution in building relationships with those of us who are Irish. So the Queen will certainly be remembered here with affection and with respect across the political divide.
Emma, thank you too for joining us and for giving us a sense of the response there in Northern Ireland. Emma Vardy at Stormont. Well, Queen Elizabeth came to the throne at the age of 25, came to the throne in rather sudden and abrupt circumstances when her father died at a relatively young age. And during her long reign, she witnessed momentous social and economic change in Britain and indeed throughout the Commonwealth. Her Majesty's death concludes a major chapter of British history, a chapter that opened at the midpoint of the 20th century as Britain emerged from the years of the Second World War. My colleague Nicholas Witchell presents this account of the Queen's long life.
I here present unto you Queen Elizabeth, your undoubted Queen. Is your Majesty willing to take the oath?
She was 27 when she took the coronation oath.
I solemnly promise so to do.
She was anointed, blessed and consecrated. She took possession of a 1,200-year-old throne. She knew that it was a role from which only death could release her. And yet, when she was born, no one had thought that it would be her destiny. Elizabeth Alexandra Mary Windsor was born on the 21st of April 1926. She was the first child of the then King's second son, the Duke of York. This was the young Princess Elizabeth at the age of 4, visiting a photographic studio in London. Her life then was comparatively carefree. It was the abdication in 1936 of her uncle, King Edward VIII, that unexpectedly placed Elizabeth in direct line to the throne. Her father became king. His coronation gave the then 11-year-old Elizabeth a foretaste of what lay in store for her. The family unit was strong. Her father, George VI, was devoted to her, and she to him. Throughout her life, he was to be her inspiration. During the Second World War, as German bombs fell on Britain, the royal family symbolised the country's fight against tyranny. Elizabeth briefly joined up. She was taught how to drive and to service an army lorry. On the night Britain celebrated victory in Europe, the crowds gathered outside Buckingham Palace, and Elizabeth joined her family on the palace balcony. By now she was a young woman, and she'd fallen in love. Her engagement to Lieutenant Philip Mountbatten was announced in July 1947. 4 months later, they were married in Westminster Abbey.
Again and again the people called for Elizabeth and Philip. Again and again they joyfully responded.
A year later, their first child, Charles, was born. 2 years after that, a daughter, Anne. The king had been in poor health. He'd been treated for lung cancer. When Elizabeth left for a visit to East Africa in February 1952, it was to be the last time she would see him.
The flag is low as the news spreads. The king is dead.
At the moment of her father's death from a heart attack, Elizabeth was in a game park in Kenya.
The news that she was now Queen was given to her by her husband.
Her tour of the Commonwealth cancelled. The princess we knew as a girl and watched in the even growth of her stature comes back to meet her ministers as Queen.
In a way, I didn't have an apprenticeship. My father died much too young, and so it was all a very sudden kind of taking on and making the best job you can.
Britain was stunned at the loss of its wartime king. His coffin was brought by train from Sandringham to London. Elizabeth was there to receive it with her mother and sister.
And now, here comes Her Majesty.
Elizabeth's coronation in June 1953 was one of the biggest public celebrations in Britain's recent history. For the first time, television cameras were allowed into Westminster Abbey. The ceremony was broadcast to millions.
The moment of the Queen's crowning is come.
As Elizabeth was crowned, she accepted what, to her, was a sacred duty, an obligation to serve, which was to set her apart for the remainder of her life. Elizabeth was sovereign and head of state not just of the United Kingdom, but of Britain's realms and territories in every continent.
Sydney-siders turn out to greet their Queen.
In late 1953, she set off on the first of many overseas tours, with a 6-month trip to Australia, New Zealand and the Pacific.
I want to tell you all how happy I am to be amongst you, and how much I look forward to my journey through Australia.
This is a joyous, spine-tingling welcome.
The young Queen was a star on the world stage, and her popularity was never greater. It's estimated that, in Australia, 3/4 of the country's entire population turned out to see her in person. But as the 1950s gave way to the swinging 60s of the Beatles, attitudes started to change. Old certainties were questioned. The monarchy was seen by some to be stuffy and out of touch. By the late 60s, the palace realised that it needed to take the initiative. The result was a groundbreaking television documentary. The film Royal Family showed the monarchy as it had never been seen before. Elizabeth was shown performing the daily business of the sovereign.
Yes, ma'am. Oh, do you think you could bring up those papers that I was looking at yesterday?
And meeting visiting dignitaries.
The American ambassador, Your Majesty. Oh, why have you done that?
Here we go.
But the film also showed something of the private Elizabeth, relaxing with her family on a picnic at Balmoral.
The salad is ready.
Good.
Her silver jubilee was celebrated with street parties and pageants in 1977.
Good evening, Your Majesty. You've had a very long day.
By the 1980s, Britain had its first woman Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher. Relations between female head of state and female head of government were sometimes said to have been strained.
With this ring, I thee wed.
I thee wed.
For the Queen and her family, the 1980s had begun with a moment of great promise. Prince Charles's wedding in July 1981 to the young Lady Diana Spencer seemed to be a moment of hope for the future. When the marriage began to fail, its decline was a very public one. The couple's separation was announced in 1992. It followed the collapse of the marriages of Princess Anne and Prince Andrew. To compound the misery that year, the Queen had seen part of her favourite home, Windsor Castle, destroyed by fire. She was devastated. The fire seemed to symbolise the reversal of the royal family's fortunes. Little wonder that in a speech the Queen described 1992 as her annus horribilis, her horrible year. But worse was to follow. The death of the by now divorced Diana, Princess of Wales, in a car crash in Paris in August 1997 was to provoke what, for the Queen, was a shocking backlash against the monarchy. She'd remained at Balmoral with Princes William and Harry after Diana died. Her priority had been to care for her grandsons. But to the grieving crowds outside Buckingham Palace and elsewhere, it seemed as though the royal family simply didn't care. The Queen returned to Buckingham Palace and, in an unprecedented live broadcast on the eve of Diana's funeral, she tried to heal the breach that had opened between the palace and the people.
What I say to you now, as your Queen and as a grandmother, I say from my heart.
The Queen promised to learn the lessons from Diana's life and the reaction to her death. The whole episode had shaken her. For the first time, she'd appeared to be out of tune with the feelings of her people. With Charles's marriage to his long-term companion Camilla Parker Bowles in April 2005, the royal family was finally able to turn the page on the domestic anguish of previous decades. It was time to move on. For the Queen, it was a moment of relief, and in the years that followed, with scarcely any lessening of her workload, she appeared to enjoy her role with renewed enthusiasm. In 2011, she was at Westminster Abbey for the wedding of her grandson Prince William to Catherine Middleton. It was a moment when the public's appreciation for the monarchy seemed to be reconfirmed. A few weeks later, at the age of 85, the Queen made one of the most important foreign visits of her reign when she became the first British monarch to visit the Republic of Ireland. She laid a wreath in memory of those Irish nationalists who'd risen up against the Crown, and at a state dinner in Dublin Castle, she spoke with regret about Britain's treatment of Ireland.
With the benefit of historical hindsight, we can all see things which we would wish had been done differently, or not at all.
The following year in Belfast, she met and shook hands with Martin McGuinness, a former leader of the IRA who by then was Deputy First Minister of Northern Ireland. It was another significant gesture of reconciliation. Her Diamond Jubilee in 2012 confirmed the nation's regard for a monarch who'd reigned for 60 years.
Mr. Bond, Your Majesty.
It was also the year when the Queen showed that she too could spring a surprise.
Good evening, Mr. Bond.
Good evening, Your Majesty.
Sovereign and secret agent, one of the highlights of the opening night of the London Olympics. By the time of her 90th birthday in April 2016, she'd become the United Kingdom's longest reigning monarch, its oldest, and few would disagree, one of its most deeply respected.
It's for me.
She continued with her public duties well into her 90s. There was further family turmoil, though. Prince Andrew was forced to withdraw from public life amid claims he'd sexually assaulted a 17-year-old, claims he denied. And then the Sussexes, Harry and Meghan, decided that they wanted to step back from royal life. They moved to California and gave a television interview in which Meghan made damaging criticisms of the royal family. They were unsettling moments, presided over by a monarch who showed that her sense of commitment was undiminished.
Together we are tackling this disease.
During the coronavirus emergency of 2020, she broadcast a reassuring message to the nation.
We should take comfort that while we may have more still to endure, better days will return. We will be with our friends again. We will be with our families again. We will meet again.
Her words seemed to encapsulate her role as monarch, drawing on her own long experience to help settle the nation at a moment of difficulty. Her resilience was evident again in April 2021, when her beloved husband Philip died 2 months short of his 100th birthday. They'd been married for 73 years. At Philip's funeral at St. George's Chapel within Windsor Castle, she seemed a solitary figure, pausing at one point to turn and look back. The figure who'd been 2 paces behind her for so many years was now absent. Elizabeth had lost the husband who'd meant so much to her. But despite the great sadness of her loss, there was never any question of her withdrawing from the path of duty. She marked the 70th anniversary of her accession to the throne, a record no other monarch had achieved, in February 2022. By then it was apparent that she was rather more frail physically than before, though mentally as sharp as ever. Her doctors had advised her to take things a little easier. Light duties was the expression used by the palace, but every day there were red boxes full of official papers to deal with. In a message to mark her 70 years on the throne, she said she was humbled by the loyalty and affection she'd received throughout her reign, and she signed the statement, "Your servant, Elizabeth R." By June 2022 and the public celebration of her Platinum Jubilee, her declining health limited the events she could attend. There was, however, a delightful surprise. A pre-recorded appearance, a somewhat chaotic tea party with Paddington Bear.
Perhaps you would like a marmalade sandwich. I always keep one for emergencies.
So do I. I keep mine in here.
Happy Jubilee, ma'am. And thank you for everything.
That's very kind.
This was a monarch at peace and enjoying herself. On the final day of the Jubilee celebrations, there was a final appearance on the balcony of Buckingham Palace. The national anthem was sung. A much-loved monarch acknowledged the many thousands who'd waited to greet her. The crowds cheered and cheered, but finally it was time to go. The Queen turned to depart from the balcony on which she'd first been seen as a baby. There was an unspoken feeling that an era was drawing to a close. Throughout her reign, Elizabeth II embodied the strengths of a constitutional monarch, a constant and reassuring presence at the centre of our national life. For decade after decade, she represented a changing kingdom to itself and to the world. Above all, hers was a life guided by Christian faith and driven by a profound sense of duty, and by the pledge she made to the world on her 21st birthday.
I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service and to the service of our great imperial family to which we all belong. God help me to make good my vow, and God bless all of you who are willing to share in it.
a life story like no other, really. Beautifully done, Nick, if I may say so. Such a lovely tribute. And really to just encompass lots of different facets of the Queen's personality and life, which came over very strongly in that film that you put together. And I think for lots of people watching at home, a very powerful and moving reminder of what the Queen has represented in people's lives.
Yes.
Even at times when the royal family's not been playing a prominent role for whatever reason in certain events, jubilees and all the rest of it. Just a reminder of the personality and the power of the Queen over the last 70 plus years.
We won't see her like again, Hugh. I think we can say that. Excuse me. It is hard to imagine Britain without her. And, you know, we were talking about it earlier, weren't we? The key to this, I think, is humility. She recognised that as a hereditary monarch who was there just by virtue of her birth, she had to earn the respect and the trust of her people. And she referred to it on the night of her coronation in a broadcast on the BBC. She said, "Throughout all of my life and with all of my heart, I shall strive to be worthy of your service." We saw how she signed that message at the time of the 70th anniversary of her accession, "Your servant, Elizabeth R." As a former Archbishop of Canterbury, Donald Coggan, said, "It has been service untiringly done and duty faithfully fulfilled."
I think there'll be millions watching who will say amen to all of that. Nick, thanks very much. Of course, the Queen was not just the monarch for the UK. She was the head of state in 14 other Commonwealth nations. And our diplomatic correspondent, James Landell, has been looking at the international response to today's news.
From the moment the Queen's reign began in Kenya in 1952, she played a constant and significant role on the international stage. And today there was an outpouring of sorrow and regret in every corner of the globe.
As her 12th Canadian Prime Minister, I'm having trouble believing that my last sit-down with her was my last. I will so miss those chats. She was thoughtful, wise, curious, helpful, funny, and so much more. She was one of my favorite people in the world, and I will miss her so.
The President of France, Emmanuel Macron, said Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth embodied the continuity and unity of the British nation for over 70 years. I keep the memory of a friend of France, a Queen of Hearts who marked her country and her century forever. The Indian Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, said Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth will be remembered as a stalwart of our times. She provided inspiring leadership to her nation and people. And the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, said it is with deep sadness that we learned of the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth. On behalf of the Ukrainian people, we extend sincere condolences to the royal family, the entire United Kingdom and the Commonwealth over this irreparable loss. The President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, who met the Queen in more peaceful times, offered his condolences, saying she'd enjoyed the love and respect of her subjects and authority on the world stage. She was dubbed by one of her biographers as Queen of the World, visiting hundreds of countries throughout her reign. She was monarch of 15 separate realms, the head of a commonwealth of some 56 nations. So there was no surprise that news of the Queen's death made headlines around the world.
Königin Elisabeth II. Ist tot. Das teilte der Buckingham Palast in London mit.
Tonight at the White House, the flags were at half-mast. Throughout her reign, the Queen was a living embodiment of the transatlantic relationship, meeting no fewer than 12 US presidents. In a statement, President Biden described her as a stateswoman of unmatched dignity and constancy. Barack Obama said she had reigned with grace, elegance, and a tireless work ethic, views echoed on the streets of Washington.
I admire her greatly. Yeah, I'm so sorry that she's passed. I mean, she's an icon here, everywhere.
Horrible. I've been reading about her my whole life. She's one of the sane people in the UK, like the US, and that's just sad.
As head of the Commonwealth throughout her reign, the Queen nurtured and shaped a unique international organisation whose leaders, past and present, relied on her wisdom and judgment.
The last days of the Queen's life captures who she was in so many ways, working till the very end on behalf of the people she loved. And that is why I'm sure that we will receive the news of her passing with both emotions of deep sadness, but also gratitude for a life that was utterly and completely devoted to the service of others.
And it was to a meeting of Commonwealth leaders that the Queen made her last overseas tour in 2015, visiting Malta, an island she'd once called home. The bookend of a life of duty and diplomacy on the international stage. James Landell, BBC News.
Let's explore the international response then a little more. In a moment, I'll be talking to my colleague Katya Adler, our Europe editor in Brussels. First, let's go to Washington and our North America correspondent, John Sudworth. We heard James there, John, talking about the embodiment of the transatlantic alliance. Is that the kind of stature and importance that people are attaching to this news today?
I think it is, Hugh. First off, the flag is flying at half-staff here at the White House in honour of a reign that has seen the swearing in of 13 US presidents. The Queen met 12 of them personally, and the last in that long line, Joe Biden, of course, is currently at the British Embassy here in Washington, a couple of miles away from where I am, where he has signed a book of condolence and made a few brief remarks. And in an earlier statement, he spoke of how in his meetings with the Queen, she had cheered him and the First Lady with her wit and moved them with her kindness. I think in recent years, of course, like so many other parts of the world, news coverage of the British monarchy has been driven often by the scandal and the intrigue. But there is no doubt today in the rolling news coverage of events at Balmoral that there is a real sense of a moment in history. Don't forget, Hugh, that the last King of America, George III, was a direct relation of Elizabeth II, but hers was an era, of course, defined by that special relationship between two independent democratic nations, and she often referenced it. In 1961, she said to President Kennedy that free people all over the world looked to America as a place of aspiration and hope.
John, many thanks. John Sudworth there with some thoughts for us at the White House. And let's go then to Brussels and talk to Katya, who's there for us. Katya Adler, our Europe editor. Of course, the UK's relationship with Europe, and more particularly the European Union, has changed dramatically in recent years, Katya. So how would you describe the response today to the Queen's death, given that the relationship, as I say, between the UK and other countries has, well, let's just say it's not the same as it was?
Well, when it comes to the Queen, I think you cannot overstate the respect and admiration that so many Europeans feel for her. Here outside the European Commission, flags are flying at half-mast, as outside the European Parliament as well. Over in Paris, the Eiffel Tower has been plunged into darkness as a sign of respect. And if you go on any European news website tonight, Die Königin, La Reina, La Reine, news of her death is on the front page. If you look at Norway's public broadcaster, they've totally stopped normal programming to concentrate on the Queen. And of course, we've heard from leaders, from heads of state, the German president describing the Queen as a woman who shaped a century, Emmanuel Macron saying a kind-hearted Queen who left a long-lasting impression. Previously, he described her as a golden thread binding France and the UK since World War II. And of course, because of her decades of public duty and family ties. She had very close relationships with the royal families of Europe as well, and very unusually for them, we've been hearing very personal, very touching messages. If you look at the King of Spain, King Felipe, he used to refer to her as dear Aunt Lilibet, and tonight he said he would miss her dearly. And here in Belgium, the King and Queen said all of their encounters and would be etched on their memories forever. Your Majesty, rest in peace, they said, alongside your beloved husband.
Katya, thank you very much. Katya Adler with thoughts for us there in Brussels. Let's take a look then in some more detail, if we can, at what's going on outside Buckingham Palace right now. This late at night, it's 11:15, and there are still lots of people there. Lots of people have determined to stay there to show their sympathy for the royal family, to express their own sadness at the news, and people are still milling around at this late hour in central London. Clearly Buckingham Palace, the main focus of people's expressions of sympathy there. But the notices, of course, the formal notices of the Queen's death were also posted on other royal palaces, including Holyrood House and but Balmoral, and of course at Windsor as well, and elsewhere, Sandringham too. So that's the scene at Buckingham Palace. And while we look at these images, it's worth reminding ourselves that Boris Johnson, the former Prime Minister, one of those who was paying tribute to the Queen today, in an eloquent tribute by him. He called her a bright and shining light that has finally gone out. And the First Ministers of Wales and Scotland, as we said earlier, have been paying their respects, honouring the Queen's sense of duty and her resilience. So our political correspondent, Leila Nathu, reflects now on the words expressed today.
Flags being lowered to half-mast at Downing Street this evening. Tonight, former residents paid tribute to the Queen, who'd asked them to form a government.
The example, the duty, the selflessness, the way in which other people were put first, the way in which she handled crisis with great stoicism when they occurred, as they occurred a number of times during her reign. They were all examples to people about how to behave in their own lives and examples for our country.
Her longest serving Prime Minister, Sir Tony Blair, said, "We have lost not just our monarch, but the matriarch of our nation, the figure who more than any other brought our country together, kept us in touch with our better nature, personified everything which makes us proud to be British." Gordon Brown took over the Labour government in 2007. He reflected tonight on the impression the Queen made around the world.
Everywhere I went, Her Majesty was respected, she was admired, she was revered, and we will miss her greatly. There is no monarch who has served so long with such popularity and held in such high esteem and dedicated ourselves so much to the future of our country.
David Cameron returned the Conservatives to power in 2010. He said of the Queen, "There can be no finer example of dignified public duty and unstinting service," saying, "We all owe our sincere gratitude for her continued devotion. I was fortunate to have been able to call on the knowledge of the world's greatest public servant and indeed the world's most experienced diplomat." In 2016, the Queen appointed Theresa May as Britain's second female Prime Minister.
I was fortunate enough to be able to meet her in different circumstances, including in the weekly audiences, but also at Balmoral, and saw a more relaxed Queen. But I think we are all mourning the fact that somebody who was a constant in our lives has now passed away.
It was just days ago that the Queen accepted the resignation of Boris Johnson as Prime Minister. Tonight, he said, "We think of her deep wisdom and historic understanding, and her seemingly inexhaustible but understated sense of duty. This is our country's saddest day, because she had a unique and simple power to make us happy. That is why we loved her." There was a sombre mood among politicians in Westminster and around the country.
The Queen was an ever-fixed mark in our lives. The world changed around us, politicians came and went. The Queen was our nation's constant. The Queen represented duty and courage, as well as warmth and compassion. The
Queen was a living reminder of our collective past, of our greatest generation, and the sacrifices made for our freedom today.
Scotland loved, respected and admired her. And by all accounts, Her Majesty was really happier than when she was here in Scotland at her beloved Balmoral, a fact I have been privileged to observe personally. I hope it will be a source of comfort to her family that she spent her final days in a place that she loved so much.
On behalf of the Welsh Government and people in all parts of Wales, I offer our deepest condolences to all Her Majesty's children and their families on this sad occasion. She will be sorely missed by the many organisations in Wales she championed and supported over so many decades as patron or as president.
MPs have been accustomed to the Queen setting out government priorities in Parliament. Tomorrow, they will begin paying their tributes in the Commons. Leila Nathu, BBC News.
Well, faith leaders have been probably among the most prominent of those today who've been paying tribute to the Queen's work. The Queen, of course, a person who drew a lot of strength from her Christian faith. We've had the Cardinal of Westminster for the Roman Catholic Church paying his tribute earlier. We had the Chief Rabbi. We had the Muslim Council of Great Britain. And, of course, the Archbishop of Canterbury, who paid his own tribute to Justin Welby, to the Queen's kindness and her sense of great duty and the values, the Christian values that she put into practice in terms of dealing with others and considering problems which people shared. Our religion editor, Ali Makboul, joins us now from Lambeth Palace, which is the Archbishop of Canterbury's official London residence. And Alim, such a strong link, obviously, for titular reasons, for official reasons, between the Queen and the established church, the Church of England.
Absolutely right. As well as being head of state, of course, she was defender of the faith, supreme governor of the Church of England as well. But by all accounts, as you were alluding to there, those were titles that the Queen considered more than constitutional duties. They were things that she lived by. We heard that in the statement given by the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, who alluded to the fact that her faith really guided her, in his words, hour by hour, day by day. And of course, Justin Welby talked about his profound sadness at the news, but also the great privilege it had been to meet the Queen on many occasions, talking about, as others have, of course, about her humility, her humour, her kindness, and saying that she had been a great blessing to us all. But the Queen, certainly in the latter parts of her reign, had been very clear that she felt that Anglicanism had a duty to protect people of other faiths, to be able to practice other faiths, and that's reflected in the huge number of messages, as you were saying, that have come from other faith groups. Pope Francis also has sent a telegram to the King offering his condolences. Now, we hear that the Archbishop of Canterbury is due to meet the King tomorrow, and the Church of England has also called for churches across the country at midday to toll their bells for a full hour in respect.
Alim, thank you. Ali Makboul, our religion editor at Lambeth Palace, which is the official residence of the Archbishop of Canterbury. As we approach the end of this broadcast, it seems appropriate that we can just remind ourselves of a very happy episode in June of this year, when the United Kingdom celebrated the Platinum Jubilee, 70 years of Her Majesty's reign. And that, of course, a landmark that no other British monarch has reached. And it was 4 days of great celebration and happiness, and the Queen made some memorable appearances there. Our royal correspondent, Sarah Campbell, reminds us now of those rather wonderful 4 days.
The sun shone and crowds filled the Mall. For 4 days in June, the message could not have been clearer.
God
A galaxy of rock royalty and the British people in their thousands celebrating a reign etched so deeply in our memories.
Your Majesty, Mummy, you have been there for us for these 70 years. These pictures on your house are the story of your life and ours.
And listen to the reaction of this delighted and grateful crowd.
The Queen's appearances were brief but unforgettable.
Oh, that's wonderful.
On the first day, her delight both at the sight and sound of so many people and the antics of her great-grandson were obvious. That evening, Her Majesty lit the first of a giant chain of beacons, symbols of hope in 2,500 towns and cities from Shetland to Australia and New Zealand.
What a wonderful sound those bells can be heard all over the City of London.
The next morning, the bells of St Paul's marked the national service of Thanksgiving, the surrounding pavements packed with well-wishers.
We'll never see this again in our lifetime, so it's really a special day for us, yeah.
Absolutely magical atmosphere. We're enjoying every second.
This was the largest gathering of royals since before the pandemic. Almost all the members of her family were there, but not the Queen. She was unable to attend in person, but watched the service from home.
Thank you for showing us how service and faithfulness matter.
This is English champagne, especially for the Queen.
The thank yous continued at tens of thousands of Jubilee lunches, bringing communities together, something the Queen had done throughout her reign.
We talk about it, love, love, love. We talk about it, love.
At the Platinum Party at the Palace, a lineup of legends. Each with their own memory of Britain's longest reign.
And I've grown up with this woman. You know, I was 7 when she came to the throne. So she's always been part of my life.
Around the Olympics, she was absolutely essential when some of the selection panel come through the city. She hosted them at Buckingham Palace on a Friday night and even appeared on the balcony and waved them goodbye. So it sort of put Paris and Madrid in its place.
Yes.
I do hope you're having a lovely Jubilee.
To those memories, she added
tea?
2 more.
Oh, yes, please.
Stealing the show with Paddington.
A wave from Her Majesty to acknowledge the wave of love that is surely coming across that balcony and sweeping its way through the palace.
And bringing events to a close on the balcony of Buckingham Palace, surrounded by her family, including her 3 heirs. A wonderful 4-day party was officially over. But what a Platinum Jubilee it had been.
Wasn't that lady right in the crowd when she said, "We just know this is such a special event and we're never going to see anything like this again"? And she just struck exactly the right note. It was a lovely 4 days. Nicholas Witchell is still with me. A last word, Nick, before we end this broadcast. I don't like to ask the question, but I'm bound to ask the question for reasons of curiosity for people watching, certainly. What happens now in the next few days?
Celebrations 3 months ago, now mourning, a period of national mourning, and millions of people will mourn, and they will feel that mourning very personally and very keenly, I think, and it won't just be in this country, it will be elsewhere as well. The crown has passed immediately, imperceptibly and visibly to Charles. He, of course, no heir to the throne has waited for longer, no heir to the throne has been older on succeeding to the throne, and it is now to him, as the personification of the crown, that all the main organs of the state owe their allegiance: the armed forces, the judiciary, the courts, the civil service, the government. He will address the nation at some point. There will be a meeting of the Accession Council when the reign of Charles III will be proclaimed. He is king. There is no swearing in. There's nothing like that necessary. Bells will be rung and guns will be sounded in tribute to Queen Elizabeth. There will be church services and condolence books will be opened. And flowers will be laid, and I suspect on a scale that we will not have witnessed since the death of Diana, Princess of Wales. And then in approximately 10 days from now, we will get all the details from the palace in due course. But in approximately 10 days, there will be the state funeral. And of course, we haven't seen a state funeral in this country since the state funeral of Winston Churchill in 1965. And then the king and the nation will have a chance to pay their final respects to the monarch who signed herself your servant, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II.
Nick, again, thank you, and we will talk surely in the days ahead. But thank you for your contributions today as we reflect on the long life and reign of Elizabeth II. Nicholas Witchell, our royal correspondent. Coming to the end of this momentous day, a significant milestone, we can all agree, in the history of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth. The longest serving monarch in history, no longer with us. Her eldest son is already king. It's a day that few in Britain will forget for as long as they live. There will be continuing coverage now from my colleague Christian Fraser, but we will leave you tonight with some of the great images, those powerful and moving images from the Queen's life. So from all of the team here, thank you for being with us and good night.
It is our dearest hope that the Queen will be happy, and our resolve unswerving that our reign shall be as glorious as her devoted subjects can help us to make it.